Hey, you boned my wife, but it's okay because we're teammates and we're winning together.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your three hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
How's your wife and my kids?
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week the audience selects from 4 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinders and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of each podcast, the three of us will provide you with the number of wipes each movie would need to take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us everywhere on social media. Big D, this week's theme was Charlie Sheen movies, correct?
Correct. This was recommended by one of our listeners, and they're big Charlie Sheen fans. So we had Wall Street from 87, Major League from 89. The Always seems like listed Red Dawn of 84 and Young Guns. And the clear winner with 57% was Major League. Now, I don't know if it was because baseball season's opening or people love it, but I got to say it was a good one.
Wait a minute. I had no idea Charlie Sheen was actually in Young Guns. I thought it was just Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, we talked about this, Big D and I did. He was actually not one of the young, like he wasn't one of the gang. He was another character, and I think he was actually like a villain in Young Guns. But here's the thing, any of these, I haven't seen Wall Street, but the other three, like Major League, Red Dawn, Young Guns, all of them are great movies. I mean, I wouldn't say, let's not say great movies. They're movies I really enjoy watching.
The only thing I remember from Young Guns is Young Guns 2, the Bon Jovi music video. Wanted Dead or Alive. That's all I remember of Young Guns. I can't believe one of my favorite all-time Charlie Sheen movies is Hot Shots. How did Hot Shots not make this list?
I don't think it's on the same level as these.
What? You're crazy. I could watch Hot Shots any time of the year. Like, it doesn't matter.
Even Hot Shots Part 2?
Yeah, I'd watch both of them back to back in a compilation.
No, I'll pass.
All right, so Big D, you said Major League 1?
Yeah, 57%.
57%. I'm very excited for this movie. If you've never seen Major League or you've never listened to the podcast, here's how it's going to happen. It's a spoiler kind of show, so we're going to talk about the movie. So if you haven't watched it, now's your time to pause the podcast, go watch it, then come back, turn it on, and listen to it. Major League is a 1989 movie where the new owner of the Cleveland Indians puts together a purposefully horrible team so that they'll lose and she can move the team to Miami. But when her plot is uncovered, they start winning just to spite her. Guys, this movie, being a Little League baseball player, growing up playing baseball all throughout, varsity high school, this was my favorite sports film of all time.
Rod, you're not joking when you say you played baseball. I was shocked when we went to the Renaissance Festival together, and I apologize if I've told this story already on the podcast, but you threw tomatoes at a guy, and I feared for his life. I mean, I've never seen... And then I saw videos of you at a Diamondbacks game catching pop flies. I'm like, holy shit, this guy's a legit athlete. I was surprised. No offense, but I just, again, I played a little football, but nothing near the level of what you do.
Wow, I don't know if this is the same person I played softball with for years. I would describe him as serviceable.
You're
but
terrible.
Yes, I got to tell you, honestly, the video of you catching those fly balls at opening day in Arizona, that was something to be commended, and I do respect you for that athletic act.
Yeah, I was absolutely in love with this movie. And comedies at this age, like I said, I loved Hot Shots. I loved Hot Shots Part 2. I was a big fan of Airplane. So I feel like this movie brought the two together. I was also a catcher growing up, and it seemed like all the cool movies that I really enjoyed had that like star catcher that was like the leader. And maybe that had something to do with the fact that I love these movies so much.
Yeah, they always had the catchers be the wise veteran, the sage who would take the young star under their wing. But I grew up in New York, and I now know the Yankees now, and everyone who's been a fan of like the last 15, 20 years knows them as a winner. I grew up becoming a Yankee fan in the early 80s. It was a dark, dark time for the Yankees. So I remember this movie coming out. It was the first time when they played the Yankees in that one-game playoff that I'd ever seen the Yankees portrayed in any kind of playoff. So that was what I loved about it as a kid.
For me, I just remember this thing being on all the time. If you were at summer camp, if you were just at a friend's house, I mean, this was a constant movie that was with all of us. And this week when I started talking about people about, watching it for the podcast, a lot of people I knew either weren't even familiar with the movie or had never watched it. And I was kind of shocked by that. I thought this was just required viewing for all Americans. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's really, really worthwhile.
Yeah, but this was also around the time, Big D, that like every movie it seemed in like the late 80s, early 90s was a baseball movie. Hollywood caught baseball fever.
Yeah, we talked about this on the Twister cast and said when Hollywood finds a winning formula, they just beat it to death. So we had in the early 90s, we had natural disasters. So we talked about the volcano or Dante's Peak or whether it was a meteor, a deep impact in Armageddon. Baseball in the 80s and 90s was kind of that hot button. I mean, we had Bull Durham, 8 Men Out, Stealing Home, Talent for the Game, A League of Their Own, Mr. Baseball, and then, of course, The Sandlot. So that time frame was huge for baseball. And you figure baseball was America's pastime. It was bigger during that time period. Now it's kind of fallen a bit out of favor to some of the newer sports. But funny thing is, actually that same month of April in 89, Major League and Field of Dreams came out within a few weeks apart. And they're both, some of the most memorable baseball films ever released.
Does it seem like baseball is the best sport to make a movie about? Like, it almost seems like you can make baseball any genre of movie you want. It could be a comedy. It could be a drama. It could be a thriller. It could be a wacky, subversive series on HBO, right, with Eastbound and Down. I feel like baseball is a sport that maybe because of the simple pastime pleasures of it, it can be made into fantastic movies.
I think a large part of that has to do with, the old saying about baseball, it's boring until it isn't, sort of thing. You can really isolate key moments. I mean, you could skip an entire baseball game and just go to one inning, and you get the spirit of the game. You can encapsulate everything that was important about that game. And so I think a large part of it is that. Also, baseball in and of itself, if you look at teams like classically like the Oakland A's, the Chicago White Sox, they're just teams of weirdos, and there always have been. I think hockey is another sport like that where the characters are just different. You look at football, you look at basketball, there's a few strange characters, but not nearly historically as many weirdos as there have been in baseball.
I mean, you look back in baseball history, you have some of the best hitters like Wade Boggs, who every game night would eat chicken. His superstition was that was what helped him go. He did it for his entire career, ended up in the Hall of Fame. So the belief that Cerrano would have some kind of voodoo shrine in his locker to help him hit is believable. So when you're making a movie, there's nothing that would stretch our imagination or disbelief.
Well, what I love about this movie is you can tell there's a real love for the Cleveland Indians and for the town of Cleveland. And I think that has to do with the fact that the writer-director, David S. Ward, grew up a huge Cleveland Indians fan, right?
Yeah, he wrote the movie as an homage to his favorite team. He was a Cleveland Indians fan since he was 5 years old. He grew up and he knew the team hadn't had a winning first place season since 1960. So that inspired him. He said, if I want to see the Indians win in my lifetime, I have to write it. And he said, because I know no one would take the Indians winning seriously, obviously it had to be a comedy. So this was a labor of love for him and the city of Cleveland. And still to this day, you figure now the movie came out in 89, they still haven't won it.
Well, what's bonkers about this movie is just the fact that it's had not only a cultural impact on fans of the movies and kids who grew up playing baseball and watching this movie, but it also trickled into the major leagues. Like, you guys remember Mitch Williams? He played for like the Phillies and I think the Braves, Mitch Williams, about mid-90s. Big D, you know who I'm talking about.
Of course.
Right? He modeled his entire career based on the character of Ricky Vaughn. He changed his number to 99 and would play Wild Thing every time he came out. But Mitch Williams, I remember him being like the biggest punk in the entire world. He was no Ricky Vaughn.
Well, I think that was John Rocker is the biggest punk. But yes, Mitch Williams is also remembered by all Philly fans, I'm sure, who still love him for giving up that infamous walk-off home run to Joe Carter in Toronto. So yes, he was no Ricky Vaughn.
But outside of players modeling their lives after Ricky Vaughn, which you had to expect with a popular movie like this that was a huge hit, but it also it was a foreshadowing of the 1995 Seattle Mariners, which up until that point had only existed for the greed of its owner. And the Mariners were constantly bottom-dwelling basement team out in the West that no one really cared about. And the owner was constantly fighting with the city of Seattle and threatening to move it to Miami or Tampa Bay. I remember this growing up in Florida. The Seattle Mariners were always the team that was promised to come. That they built Tropicana Field for the Seattle Mariners. But in 1995, something miraculous happened.
Nothing miraculous happened. Don't talk about that season.
This scrappy little team comes up. And they're playing the New York Yankees.
Fuck you.
And they bring out Randy Johnson in the ninth inning, and they beat the Yankees, the scrappy little upstart team. They are the Cleveland Indians in this movie. Big D, is that something that you remember fondly in your life? Is just thinking back and, oh my God, I'm watching my favorite movie, Major League, happen right in front of me.
No, I can remember that game. That was I was excited. I was at game 2 of that series. The one in New York in the rain when Jim Leyritz hit the home run. But yes, that final game in Seattle where Edgar Martinez singled in Ken Griffey when he's rounding third and he slides in off Blackjack McDowell. That was a painful day, but the next year I got all better.
That's right. That is right. Like we said, this movie was a huge hit. It cost just under $9 million to make. It made just under $50 million. It ranks on IMDb's 100 best sport movies as number 44. Many baseball movies are also included on this. But guys, what are your top 3 sports movies in your opinion?
I got to go number 1, The Natural. I can still watch it over and over again, even without just having the ending. I think the whole movie is great. Robert Redford's fantastic. Hoosiers. I don't want to get caught watching the paint dry, running the picket fence, or the drunk father. I forget what his name was. Was it Shooter? Or I don't remember what his name was. And of course, Days of Thunder. I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I will watch Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman race around Talladega and Daytona.
You'll see them race their sweet and low and sugar packets up her leg. That's what you enjoy? Drifting when he's
love it.
What about you, Gene?
Yeah, I think for me, none of mine are grounded in reality in any way. I loved the sappy and ultra sentimental Field of Dreams, classic movie. Again, I cry every time I watch it. I don't know why. It goes against every law of writing I believe in, and yet for some reason it still gets to me. Again, and then the completely cheesy Green Street Hooligans, starring Elijah Wood, which is completely unbelievable. And I pretty convinced has spawned every dickhead I see at soccer games that I cannot stand. All these guys who want to model themselves after firms in England and get in fights in like the suburbs of Arizona over soccer. And finally, of course, speaking of fighting, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bloodsport, which it's got sport in the title, so I consider it a sports movie. God, please, if anybody ever wants to commission us to watch a movie and review it, Bloodsport would be a classic. So yeah, Bloodsport. It taught me about the art of the kumite, and it is a fantastic film.
Yeah, for me, my favorite top 3, Major League is there. Bull Durham, of course, with Kevin Costner, another catcher movie, and then Moneyball. I mean, even though it's fairly recent, I love the book. And when you think of the Oakland A's and you think of Billy Beane, it almost has this Major League in real life type feel good story. So those are my top 3 all time sports movies. With that being said, Big D, play the trailer.
Harry Doyle here, welcoming all of you to another season of Indians baseball.
Here's a list of the players we'll be inviting to camp.
This guy here is dead.
Cross him off, then.
We'd love for you to come to spring training for a shot at this year's club.
By the way, you were with me last night. Who's this chick on top of me? We'd still like to take a look at you at our spring camp.
Not sure I can make it by then.
Who is that?
Serrano.
What's his religion?
Voodoo.
Hey! Willie Mays Hayes here. Play like Mays, and I run like Hayes. How you doing? What the hell league you been playing in?
California Penal.
Don't you have any proven major league talent?
Now I want to put together a team that'll help us relocate to Miami.
You want us to lose?
We've been losing. What I want is for us to finish dead last.
This year, the Cleveland Indians have a multi-talented team. The first offering just a bit outside. They're masters of the sacrifice.
He's looking to sacrifice a live chicken.
One whole chicken, just like you said.
The double play.
Excuse me.
I have a much better body than she does.
Begging for me, she really does.
And the pickoff.
Every time we win, we peel a section.
Tom Berenger.
Zipper on your skirt stuck.
Use your imagination.
Charlie Sheen.
These things make me look ridiculous.
Seeing's the most important thing, son. I don't think it's that important.
Corbin Burnson. And Bob Uecker.
Haywood swings and crushes one towards South America.
Major League.
That ball wouldn't have been out of a lot of parks.
Name one.
Yellowstone.
Rachel Phelps, a former Las Vegas showgirl, has inherited the Cleveland Indians baseball team from her deceased husband. She wants to move the team to Miami, which has promised her a sweetheart deal including a new stadium. In order to do this, she must reduce the season's attendance in Cleveland Stadium to under 800,000 tickets sold, which would then trigger an escape clause in the team's lease with the city of Cleveland. Believing that finishing dead last will knock attendance down low enough for her to move, she instructs her new general manager, Charlie Donovan, to hire the worst team possible from a list she has already prepared. This list includes veteran catcher Jake Taylor, who has problems with his knees and was last playing in Mexico, incarcerated pitcher Rick Vaughn, power-hitting outfielder Pedro Cerrano, who practices voodoo to help him hit curveballs, veteran Eddie Harris, who no longer has a strong throwing arm and is forced to doctor his pitches, and third baseman Roger Dorn, a one-time All-Star who is under contract but has become a high-priced prima donna. As manager, Phelps hires Lou Brown, a career minor league manager of the Toledo Mud Hens who works in the offseason as a tire salesman. Guys, this is the opening of the movie. It's fan-frickin-tastic because it's accented. The cherry on top is that it opens with a montage of Cleveland and a Randy Newman song, which they play the entirety of. This movie is fucking fantastic.
So I'm watching this movie with my girlfriend, and she's like sick and half awake. She's got one eye open, looking at the screen, and just goes, "Is that really Cleveland?" And I said, "Yeah." And she just goes, "Oh." And look, I mean, I lived in Ohio for 5 years, very, very familiar with Cleveland, and for me, it was very sentimental. I saw that part of it, and for people who lived in Cleveland, people who live in Ohio and in the Midwest, this is it tugs right at your heartstrings. I'm right with you, but man, I cannot stand Randy Newman, so I gotta split with you there, Raj.
The guy Hooga River, you know what I mean? He's the thing I love about Randy Newman is he just talks about things around him. Those are his songs, and I don't know. There's a charm about a Randy Newman opening. Maybe it brings back memories of like Pixar movies. I don't know. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I think it fits in a animated story about toys, but him singing over what looks like a depressed Cleveland, it seemed a bit off tonally. But I got to tell you, this doesn't seem like too far of a stretch. 800,000 to break the lease. In 1985, the Indians only drew 655,000. In 88, they drew 1.4, which was when this movie was supposed to have taken place. And also in 87, it was 1 million. To me, if you want to really drop attendance, it doesn't matter what's going on the field. You should have cut concessions. You should have made bathrooms break down. You should have limited women's bathrooms. If you had done those three things, only keep limited concessions, cut out beer, and close bathrooms, you would have dropped this down to 500,000 easily.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The talent on the field, I've seen perfectly good teams, and I think Florida is a great example. You see good baseball teams that have no following at all. It just happens to be that, the audience isn't interested, or the stadium itself isn't worth going to. And again, this, Cleveland, much like Cincinnati, they've got some diehard fans, really, really dedicated fans. And just having a bad season wouldn't be enough, I think, to divert them. And 800,000 does seem like a lot of tickets to sell, actually.
But, I mean, does it seem like every sports owner today has watched Major League and now plays the role of Rachel, like that villain? I mean, we're just now seeing that with Stan Kroenke in the St. Louis Rams moving to L.A., the San Diego, who was the San Diego Chargers owner? I don't know, but that guy was run out of the town. And just recently, the Las Vegas, with the Raiders. Why are we accepting this as American fans who grew up in movies where we vilified characters like that? Now we celebrate that? It seems so un-American.
I mean, that seems like the undercurrent of the whole country, though, right? We're all like temporarily displaced millionaires. We want to side with, because you identify with that, right? Right now in the social atmosphere, it's all about like, well, that's a smart business decision. Well, yeah, it's a good way to be. And I mean, I think that there will be a reckoning there. You do see cities though, like Glendale, Arizona, where they're saying no more. Like, public funds will not be used for this stuff. You want to take off? Take off. We don't care.
You have to. And a lot of times the teams will not only just leave a fan base and the community hurt. You look at what the Rams did to St. Louis. They broke their lease and stuck them with millions of dollars of community funding. And then they had the balls, as they moved to L.A., to email out all their season ticket holders, trying to get them to buy new L.A. Rams gear. They're tone deaf, and they really don't care. And I'm hoping one day people wake up, and maybe San Diego was the first step in that. But why are we paying for billionaire stadiums to make more money and then just raise prices on us so that we can't take our families?
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the, speaking strictly about this movie, is the way that they establish these characters is maybe done simply, but it's very effective.
Yeah, you got to look back, though, in time also. We're used to now where an average major league player makes $2 or $3 million. Back in this day, in 88, the minimum league salary was $62,500. The average was $438,000. So not everybody was the multi-millionaire they are right now. It's believable that Taylor would be driving that beat-up blue car. So back in the day, we were more sympathetic to the athletes. Today, they're all millionaires fighting over our dollar.
So talking about the time capsule we're going into here, if we want to start talking about back in the day, I think we got to get some stuff out of the way here really quick. And the first thing is that we need to look at this entire review with the caveat that this movie is intensely racist. It's an intensely racist time capsule of the 80s, but there are some parts of it that hold over to today. You got racism toward Pedro Cerrano, as far as, the voodoo and all of that. You've got obviously the Asian groundskeepers. You've got and then obviously the big one that we should probably talk about right now is Chief Wahoo.
I live in Florida, okay, and we have the Seminoles, which is one of the larger mascots that come under fire. Now, the Seminole tribe apparently has said they're okay with it, but their mascot isn't that bad. Chief Wahoo, under any other circumstance, would not be accepted. He is essentially a red-faced Sambo figure. You would not allow that if you did that caricature of African American, if you did it Japanese, if you did it any other race. There's no way. It's a caricature of the race. You can pretend as a Seminole fan that, we're showing respect to the tribe. There's no way you can hide this and pretend you're showing respect to any Native Americans.
Cleveland Indians and the Florida State Seminoles are completely different situations. The Florida State Seminoles are actually endorsed by the Seminole tribe of Florida State University, and there are strict regulations and steps that the college goes through to ensure the mascot or the representation is done to the tribe's quality. And the mascot, the outfit, is actually sewn together from the tribe, from the Seminole tribe. And I know this because many of my family members have gone to Florida State University, even though I'm not a fan of Florida State because I went to University of Florida. So different things here. But let me ask you this. When you say that the characters like Cerrano or Willie Mays Hayes or the Japanese groundskeepers, you're saying that they're racist, but I feel like if it's racism if you're making fun of, and I don't think the characters ever made fun of, they were just archetypes.
Okay, no, you've got a guy who their version that he shows up, and they're counting off all the characters showing up. Here's Dorn, here's Rick, and Cerrano shows up, and they're like, he got let into the U.S. for on religious asylum. What religion is he? Voodoo. And then he's like, I'm spooky, and then it's a complete misunderstanding of a guy's entire religion and culture, and it's showing him as some sort of a bestial being as opposed to a human being that is clearly racism.
For God's sake, you have Ed Harris, the old wily spitball, Vaseline ball throwing, veteran who's trying to hold on. He is also a Bible-beating Christian who tries to get Cerrano to worship Jesus Christ as a savior. He calls Cerrano a savage. He asked if they could say a team prayer because not everyone here is a savage. So yes, this is not an archetype of a Caribbean culture or a South American. They're treating Cerrano like he is a savage.
Listen, I'm not going to buy into that this movie is... Listen, maybe there are simple roles that the characters, for the audience to, believe them in, in a quick manner. They just had to do this. I mean, not everyone can be, I don't know. You can't, in a comedy like this, you don't want to show super depth of characters, except for maybe a couple like Dorn or Jack Taylor.
So it's okay as long as we base the characters on superficial, culturally accepted stereotypes.
Yes, absolutely. It's a comedy. It's a comedy.
Okay, so you're saying if there was a gay player and every time he opened up his locker, a bunch of dildos would fall out, and then he went up to the plate every time with a boa around his neck, and they played disco music. That'd be fine.
That's completely different. That does not happen here. At what point are they making fun of the culture?
Okay, well, here's a question. Were you upset by Revenge of the Nerds, the way they depicted Lamar's throwing action with the javelin?
No, I didn't watch Revenge of the Nerds because I wasn't on that podcast.
Okay. So, no, there's no way if they had a gay shortstop who, like, after each play would just kind of act flamboyant and over the top and whatever would culturally be what they think the player would do.
Here's my argument. Major League is a brilliant movie. Major League 2 is terrible because they expand on and they go for that simple they go for simple stupid humor, like where they bring in another Cerrano and he's the Japanese ball player and he's like wearing like the Japanese headband and he's going bonsai and like that kind of stuff. That's where I see that maybe they took a wrong turn. But not in Major League 1, which is a fantastic movie.
He wants a chicken to sacrifice so he could play better, and they bring him a bucket of chicken, and that's yuck laughs. It's not an accurate depiction of the man's culture or his religion. It's being used as an instrument for laughs.
Because it's a fucking comedy. You want you want your comedies to be rooted in truth. You want them to show the accurate roles of voodoo rituals so that you can believe this as an audience member in a comedic movie about baseball.
All right, Raj, maybe you missed my initial statement because you were busy eating a fucking sandwich, but I'm talking about the fact that I'm saying you need to consider this movie. I think it's a great movie. It's a great comedy, and we have to just put it in a time capsule of this was 1989, and this was considered okay comedically. If you were to try to make this movie today, it would bomb and be obliterated by social media.
Damn social media. Well, anyway... At spring training in Tucson, Arizona, the brash but speedy center fielder Willie Mays Hayes crashes camp uninvited, but is invited to join the team after displaying his running speed. Spring training reveals several problems with the new players. Vaughn has an incredible fastball, but lacks control. Hayes is able to run the bases quickly, but only hits pop flies. And Cerrano, despite his tremendous power, cannot hit a curveball. The veterans have their own problems. Dorn refuses to aggressively field ground balls. afraid that potential injuries will damage his upcoming contract negotiations, and it becomes clear that Taylor's bad knees will be a season-long concern. On the final day, when Brown is to cut the team down to 25 players, Dorn plays a practical joke on Vaughn, making believe he was cut, resulting in a locker room brawl.
So my big question as they're cutting down this team is, you just mentioned a lot of the guys that get kept on the team. If these are the guys that they kept, how bad were the guys who didn't make the squad? Because these guys look pretty damn awful.
Yeah, that the team is struggling. And regardless of, even though this is the bottom of the Major League barrel, I can't picture them all staying together in this summer camp dormitory with bunk beds. I don't care if you're a minor leaguer, has been, past all-star. Did this really happen in the 80s?
I actually wrote this down. I'm like, wouldn't it be great if spring training was like being in the military, where you just got to, you got to bond over staying in military like barracks.
Yeah, there's no way the players' union would let this shit happen today.
Oh yeah, half the stuff in this, from their transportation, everything else, there's tons of things that the players' union would not allow. This was a nice look back to, again, when spring training was spread out a little bit more. It wasn't all centralized in the Valley, where you had like Valley National Bank as a sponsor of the scoreboard, and the fields weren't all that impressive. A lot of those old fields now aren't in use anymore, and they've got much nicer facilities across Arizona. Another thing I really loved about this movie, aside from them showing kind of the old days of spring training, was just how great James Gammon was as manager Lou Brown. He was wonderfully cast, and he reminded me a ton of these old baseball managers of the old guard, as I would call them. He was just great on screen, that low gravelly voice, and the way he approached the entire thing. It reminded me of everything I love about baseball.
God, totally. I was, commenting earlier about how we thought that, Tom Berenger pulls it off. His throw struggles a bit, and he's got a hitch in his swing. Charlie Sheen used to play baseball in high school, and had an offer to go to play college. And even in the filming, granted he was all juiced up, he was still throwing mid-80s. It was believable. But to me, also, my favorite was definitely Lou Brown. He had baseball in his veins. You look at what he does to Dorn. When Dorn, he's told him that he has to do sit-ups every time that he butchers a ground ball. He pulls out the contract, throws it on the field, and takes a piss. So it rang so true to that old time baseball and how they just did not want to hear about these coddled millionaires.
Yeah, without a doubt, he's my favorite character. And I thought, and I kind of got Major League 2 and Major League mixed up. I was like, I kept waiting for him to have a heart attack and the team rally around that. And then I realized, that's the plot of Major League 2. Spoiler alert. But like when you talk about the character, like of Lou Brown and the fact that he comes from the old guard, which manager in Major League Baseball do you most relate that to today?
I don't know. I mean, Joe Madden seems like,
right? Joe Madden.
He seems like a guy who gets it. He lets the team be themselves. He wears the funky glasses. He has fun. But at the same point, he doesn't seem to be that much of a numbers guy, even though he works for the Cubs and Theo. I'd have to go with him. Girardi's too uptight.
Yeah. Joe Madden is the classic character manager based on like a Lou Brown. Like he gets it. He's from that old school, and he knows how to take a team of vagabonds. Before he had the Cubs, it was the Rays that he brought up and made them successful. So yeah, I kept getting visions of Joe Madden in my head. And you talked about some of the players who actually played baseball, and I feel like that's tough as an actor. If you're not athletically gifted, unfortunately, it really shows. A couple of those ground balls that Corbin Burnson tries to get do not look real at all.
No, and I guess Cerrano was able to actually hit. He had played some ball himself. Wesley Snipes was apparently atrocious. He was not nearly as fast as they made him look. They never show him actually throwing the ball because he threw it so awkwardly that you could really see it. But this made me think of old-time 80s and 90s baseball. It seemed like today, it is a much younger, faster game. When I was growing up, you had the Negro Brothers. You had a lot more knuckleballers, old, wily guys who could hang on into their 40s, late 30s. Whether or not you had guys, doctoring up the ball like Ed Harris does with Cisco and also Vagisil.
Yes.
I love that. It was a time where baseball was a little more Wild West, and no one was against doctoring a ball with some snot.
Yeah.
And I like that. I miss that about baseball.
So growing up in Florida, when the Florida Marlins first became the expansion team, they had a pitcher by the name of Charlie Huff. Do you remember Charlie Huff? Charlie Huff was the Harris character. Like, he threw, I don't know, high 70s, but he was just a junk pitcher. And for fans of baseball, like growing up, to have a junk pitcher, I don't know how much of that exists anymore. I feel that everything is too corporate, too manufactured. There's none of that these days.
Well, he was actually a knuckleballer, and he's the one who taught Wakefield, who became one of the last really successful. I mean, you had the Necro Brothers and also, Gaylord Perry. You also had Gaylord Perry was the one who was renowned for doing whatever he could to get that extra 2 inches of break on his curveball and stay in the league. But back then, it was almost accepted. It was part of the game.
Yeah, but anyway, after the team returns to Cleveland after the season begins, Taylor takes Vaughn and Hayes out to dinner, but comes across his ex-girlfriend, Lynn, played by Rene Russo, who is dining with a current boyfriend. Taylor believes he can try to win her back by proclaiming he has a major league job again, but is disappointed to hear that she is already engaged.
Speaking of Rene Russo, this is the second week in a row that we've had just absolute hotness on the screen. She looks great in this, despite some really idiotic outfits that they put her in. Her hair looks amazing. She looks amazing. I mean, she's still a beautiful woman, but this young Rene Russo is really something else. But that led me to really think about how women are portrayed in this movie. There's very few of them, and every single one that is in the movie is hypersexualized, right? So you've got Rene Russo, you've got the owner of the team. You know, every woman in this movie is either a groupie or somebody who wants to bone a baseball player, or has boned a baseball player. And so that bugged me. But then I thought, for baseball, it's pretty accurate. I had a friend who was a photojournalist, and a very good photojournalist, very professional, and she shot for I can't name the Major League franchise, but she shot for a franchise. And she said that it was constant sexism, constant harassment by players, by coaching staff, by the front office, and even by fans. And that's just the air of baseball. And I hear it's also bad with soccer players, and hockey players are the only ones who are really immune to this.
Oh, hold on, not every act of predatory touching or inappropriate contact happens male to female. You don't remember the owner walking into the locker room and slapping Cerrano on the ass or touching Ricky Vaughn's cup?
But again, that reinforces my point that all the women in this movie, there's sex involved with they can't just be a person.
Oh, well, I agree with that totally. But I have a question for you, and I hope it doesn't pull us off here too far. You said you worked in the newsroom for a while, and you had a friend here who you said was a photojournalist. Do you see a need for reporters, male or female, to be in a locker room immediately after a game where athletes are showering and changing? Don't you think that should be a private place? When I see women in a men's room as they're naked or changing, that would never happen in reverse. You would never have a male photographer or reporter in a women's locker room right as they get out of the shower.
Right. So the big reason for that, as far as the newsroom perspective goes, is that we need to get that story as quickly as possible. And so we need a quote to go with the game. So you've had the game happen. They played the game. You got all the results. You got the stats and everything on paper. But you need to actually talk to a person to get quotes into the story. So you need immediate access to them. You can't wait till a press conference, especially on the East Coast, because you're going to press usually around like 11:30. And so the game is just ended. You need just those sound bites to get them in there and get it out. So that's the main reason why you do it.
So are you allowed as a man into, say, the women's U.S. soccer team? Would you be able to go in their locker room as they're changing?
Absolutely not.
Why? You don't need those quotes?
Well, no, you absolutely do need the quotes. But again, it's a matter of, the issue hasn't even arisen yet because women's sports haven't gotten that much attention. But if they even had, I think at this point, it would not be acceptable for a male to go in there.
So don't you think that adds to this environment of possible harassment and inappropriateness? If you have female reporters in a locker room and the dudes are forced to be there naked, it becomes one of the ways that they address the situation. It's awkward. When you put people in that awkward environment, things can easily go south. I think you could cut down a lot of harassment by limiting. Unfortunately, I don't want to keep women out of it. It's not about that. But men shouldn't be in women's and women shouldn't be in men's.
How about just reporters aren't allowed in locker rooms? How about just no one, male or female team? It doesn't matter. Let's wait till afterwards.
Well, in this case, I was actually talking about this stuff was happening in the dugout, at charity events, in the front office, not in the locker room at all.
Exactly. This has nothing to do with the locker room, and I think it has to do with the fact that a lot of baseball and soccer players, they grow up with baseball as the only focal point in their life. Unfortunately, there was a study. I can't name the study, but I remember they did a test of which professional athletes are the highest educated. And usually higher education also means less harassment, less type of instances like that, right? More maturity. And surprisingly, in America, the athletes that are the most educated are American football players, because most of them graduate with 4-year degrees, 5-year degrees. Baseball players the prodigies go right out of high school, or they barely finish high school, or in a lot of cases, the Caribbean players, they don't even attend school. All they do is they're under contract by Major League Baseball teams by the age of 14, and then they just go up the farm system. Same with soccer players. Soccer players, especially overseas, are academy brats. They barely go to school. All they do is train all day. So if your entire identity is built around a sport, of course you're going to be an asshole. Of course you're going to be a jerk. Of course you're going to fucking leer at every single thing, because your entire life people have been praising you and you haven't had to earn anything a lot of times. And this has been a Raj rant. Thanks so much for listening. Anyway, the Indian season starts off poorly. Vaughn's initial pitching appearances end in disaster with his wild pitches, earning him the derogatory title, Wild Thing. On a rare occasion when Vaughn does get the ball over the plate, it is hit well over 400 feet by the New York Yankees' best hitter, Clu Haywood. Brown discovers that Vaughn's eyesight is poor. Once Vaughn gets glasses, his control greatly improves, and he becomes the team's ace. Despite their flaws, the team begins to improve, so Phelps decides to demoralize them further by removing luxuries such as replacing their team jet airplane, first with a dilapidated prop plane, then with an old bus. However, these changes do not affect the Indians' performance, and the team continues to win. One night after an Indians loss where the team showed great promise, Brown mentions to Donovan that the team could do much better, perhaps even providing a few all-stars for the league if there was one thing to pull them all together. Donovan reveals Phelps' plans to Brown, who then relays the same news to the players. Brown also tells him that if the team plays too well for Phelps to void the lease, she will release them all regardless. With nothing to lose, the team agrees to get back at Phelps by winning the pennant. Brown motivates the team further by providing a double-layered cardboard cutout of Phelps from her showgirl days. After every victory, a piece of the second layer is removed, eventually presenting a nude picture of Phelps.
We mentioned how Lou Brown, gave an air of authenticity to the manager role. I think really the focal point that kind of keeps this kind of slapstick comedy grounded in baseball and reality has to be Bob Uecker. I grew up with him, and he is hands down probably one of the best play-by-play announcers that baseball has ever seen. There were lines that he just kept coming up with that I was like, oh my God, I remember that. Whether it's Vaughn, a juvenile delinquent in the offseason, or, walks the bases loaded on 12 pitches. How do they lay off pitches that close? If people today don't know that Bob actually is an announcer or used to do commercials for Miller, great comedic timing. And I think he really held it all together.
Yeah, it really feels like the movie shifted into second gear as soon as he came on and just kind of lit up the screen. A lot of authenticity in this movie, as much as it is a slapstick, as you mentioned, comedy and kind of strange in a lot of ways, there are other hints of authenticity. I have some friends that go to all D-backs games. They sit up in Section 301, or as they call it, Section 30 Fun. They're there all the time, and win or lose, when the stadium is completely empty, save for a couple, maybe 1,000 people in the entire place, and you can hear whispers on those midweek games when nobody cares, they're still up there coming up with weird chants, doing weird dances and stuff like that. Or, at Phoenix Rising, Raj and I go to soccer matches a lot, and there have been years where it's been, really dead, and you've got these people who are still out there, and those diehards are a rare breed, and I think they capture that very well in this movie.
So, Gene, I want to ask you here. I've never lived in Cleveland, and even though when I was growing up, the Yankees had 10 years of a real dry spell, so I don't have anything to compare it to. It seems in this movie that every Cleveland fan is the biggest bandwagon fan base I've ever seen. No one in the beginning even knows. They joke about, does Cleveland still have a baseball team? All of a sudden, the team goes on a winning streak and contends for a playoff bid. And people are now wearing hats. They're hugging each other in the street. They're meeting at the bus when it comes back. Is that how Cleveland is?
It's not exactly like that, but in Ohio, there are certain teams that you don't need to necessarily root for. For instance, in Ohio, you got a lot of people who live in Ohio, but they're actually Steelers fans. I don't know why. The Bengals are consistently better than the Browns, but people aren't really Bengals fans. I don't know why. So football is a little weird. Basketball is a little bit weird. But with baseball, the Reds and the Indians, still to this day, I mean, good season or bad, they've still got a following. They still have a devoted. It's nothing like the Cubs, but they do have a following. I would not consider it a bandwagon city. They've been bad for very long stretches, and the people still, wear their Indians gear, show up, and support the team.
So the team plays very well down the stretch of the season and clinch a tie for the first in the AL East by beating the Chicago White Sox on the very last day of the season. This forces a one-game playoff with the division's co-leaders, the Yankees. Prior to the playoff, Taylor continues to woo Lynn back as they share a night together. Vaughn learns that he will not be the starting pitcher for the game and goes to a bar to mope, where he encounters Susan Dorn. Feeling spited after witnessing her husband Roger with another woman, she retaliates by luring Vaughn to sleep with her. Vaughn is unaware of who she is until she tells him before leaving the apartment.
Just want to point out once again, woman introduced into the plot, and somebody has sex with her. But how does she know where to find Vaughn? This is the one part of the movie that still puzzles me, and this is probably my third or fourth full viewing of the movie, and I kept searching for that. I thought there was a way that would answer that question. Maybe I just missed it before. She just miraculously shows up at the right bar.
Well, I know there's an app that was used for the NBA that would tell women like where teams normally hang out. So if they were trying to find a professional athlete, it allowed you to you find out the bars they go to, the restaurants to try to meet them. So I think back in the day, you got to figure, where do you think Dorn's wife met him? It was probably at one of these bars in a hotel on the road. So believable. But yes, I see what you're saying now. This wasn't a question of a woman appears on screen, a man has sex with her. Her main objective is to use sex as a revenge. So yes, she is solely a sexual object. And I don't know why we're supposed to like Jake. He seems like a bit of a dirtbag. When he's trying to woo back his lost love, he talks about infidelity like it's a joke. When he talks about banging a stewardess, he says, wouldn't you rather have somebody in demand?
Yeah.
He jokes about a paternity suit.
It's totally
he jokes
alpha.
about the countless times that he's been cheating.
Yeah.
And instead of her being disgusted with it, she's enticed by it, and eventually he seduces her.
Right there against the chimney.
That's true. While she's talking about plans for her wedding.
So sexy.
No, I'm disgusted by this now.
I'm more turned on by just hearing you talk about it. It was such a sexy scene.
No, gross.
No, it's totally like an alpha move. You're just like super honest with a woman, and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's being so honest. This is turning me on. That's the move. It's a chapter in the game by Neil Strauss. It's shaped like a Bible. Go and read this. There's an entire section devoted to this. That's how you turn on a woman.
So it includes stalking her, showing up at her place of employment, and talking about sex. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're both unlikable people who don't respect their relationships, that she allows him to come into the dinner party and she entertains it. It's disrespecting her fiance. And the fact that she says, we're going to have sex, but this doesn't change anything. The only redeeming thing she does in the entire movie is at the end, we see she's not wearing the ring. So at least she respected her fiance enough to end it.
Yeah, but you know what else she's not wearing in that last scene? Any Cleveland Indians gear. She couldn't be troubled. Oh, I got rid of my ring, but couldn't buy a fucking hat.
Yeah, no. How about that Jake and Wild thing are roommates?
Well, they were both making $60,000 a year. I think it's believable.
Exactly. They live together. Anyway, Taylor advises Vaughn to keep his distance from Dorn for most of the game by staying in the bullpen. The game remains scoreless up until the seventh inning when Harris gives up 2 runs. Cerrano comes to the plate in the bottom of the 7th and misses badly on 2 curveballs. He angrily threatens his voodoo god Jobu, then hits the next pitch for a 2-run homer. In the top of the 9th, the Yankees are able to load the bases for the power-hitting Clue Haywood, and Lou decides to bring in Vaughn in to pitch to him. While Taylor taunts Haywood from behind home plate, Vaughn strikes out his nemesis on 3 straight fastballs to end the inning.
I don't want to take away from the fanfare, but at this point I'm watching the movie going, where the hell is everyone else in the Indians' rotation? Do they have any relief pitchers, any other starters, any closers? There's 2 pitchers in the entire team. What the hell is going on?
I think back in this time, nobody went under 8 innings. You got a 45-year-old out there, knuckleball junk pitcher. It's the 1-game playoff, and you're going to try to get him to close it out? The fucking complete game means nothing. Go to the damn bullpen.
So that's what I didn't like. What I did love about it, though, is that when Vaughn finally does come out of the bullpen, that entrance is absolutely electric with the wild thing and everyone getting up and going 80s crazy. And he looks so cool with his uniform all buttoned up tight and the hat and the glasses. And it's a really cool image. I love it. It's classic.
Yeah, I think this also may have been the origin of the closer's theme. I don't remember ever before this. You had Mariano Rivera coming out to enter Sandman. You had Trevor Hoffman in San Diego with, was it Hell's Bells? Before this, I don't remember it happening. So if a movie could actually make some fictional facet to the game become real, that shows you the impact of a movie.
I'd also totally forgotten about Dorn coming up for that conference on the mound. Again, speaking of why baseball makes for great movies, you can have these moments where people just talk in the middle of a game. So when Dorn comes out and, just tells Vaughn to, strike this motherfucker out, I'd forgotten that even happened. I was like, oh shit, what's going to happen here? And then, love that scene.
I love that this movie was an R-rated movie, right? If they were to try to make this movie again, it would totally be PG-13. They would try to attract the highest audience possible. But in this one, like you said, there's cursing, there's a little bit of sex, but there's no nudity, right? It's just, I don't know, it's just a fun adult movie to where they can curse in certain moments like that, and there's a level of authenticity as a result of that. I also do have to say that Jake Taylor talking shit behind the plate, that inspired me to also do that in high school and Little League games.
So you would say to a Little Leaguer,
oh yeah,
how's your mom doing? She left her
Totally.
panties in my car.
Total talk shit. Absolutely.
How does a Little Leaguer talk shit?
Listen, I would get talkings to by umpires at times, but yeah, you would just talk shit. You would tell them how bad they are at life, and that they should swing at the next pitch.
They're a kid. I'm sure they haven't had a chance to really fuck up life yet. But I want to talk to something about the core of the movie. The whole goal all along was to get attendance down. Other than the first time they're discussing the contract, attendance never comes up. It's all about wins and losses. So at this point in the game, we're pretty confident that the Indians have drawn over 800,000, right? Makes sense? So
Yeah.
Why the hell is the owner still being a dick? She's now making money. The team is stuck for another year. If you win this game, you got a playoff coming up. That's additional revenue. You're selling more shirts. Why is she still being a bitch?
So I have an answer for that. So the original ending of this movie has the owner there's a scene at the end of the movie where she says this was all a giant ruse for them to come together better as a team. It did not play well at all. So they switched the ending to where she's upset about the fact that they're winning.
I'm sure in that other ending too, she probably came out and boned everybody because that's what this. Because she's a woman and she wants sex.
Guys, 89 was wonderful. It was a great year. It was fantastic.
No, we were talking about authenticity. As a Yankee fan, the portrayal of Yankees, whether it's this or Brewster's Millions, one of the big things with the Yankees in the 80s when Steinbrenner came in, there was the Yankee appearance rules. So you had to have your hair cut. It had to be above the collar. Your mustache could not go down beyond the edge of your mouth. You could not have a goatee. You could not have a beard. So when I see Clue or other Yankees sporting those giant chops or the facial hair, to me as a Yankee fan, it rings untrue. But I'm sure most people didn't even notice it. You just wanted to make them look mean, and they're New Yorkers. They're the bad guys.
So that's an opening day for the Yankees in the Bronx, East 161st Street. Everyone who goes to Yankee games are scary. They're like East Coast meatheads. Everyone who goes to Yankee games, they're the worst fans in the world. I witnessed a guy yelling "Mets suck" for 5 straight minutes as he was drinking 2 beers. He was double fisting and had extra beers he had feet beers. He was just yelling. There's no one in Mets gear. He just was yelling "Mets suck" at 1:00 in the afternoon on a Monday.
Is that a bad thing you were saying?
just terrible. So no amount of haircuts or business-like can take away from these type of people. I have no idea why the Yankees would do that. Anyway, 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. Hayes manages to get an infield single. The Yankees respond by bringing in their head-hunting closer, Duke Simpson, to pitch to Taylor. After Hayes steals second, Taylor and Lou trade signs to the dugout, and Taylor points to center field, calling his shot. The Duke responds by throwing a fastball straight at Taylor's head, but the catcher is undeterred and gets back up and points again. However, with Hayes running, Taylor bunts instead, catching the Yankees infield off guard. Despite his weak knees, Taylor manages to beat out the throw to first as Hayes rounds third and heads for home plate. Hayes slides safely into home, giving the Indians the win on a walk-off single. As the team celebrates, Dorn punches Vaughn in the face, but then helps him up to celebrate. To continue the celebration, Jake finds Lynn in the stands, who raises her left hand to show that she is no longer wearing the engagement ring, and they reunite as the film closes.
Hey, you boned my wife, but it's okay because we're teammates and we're winning together. Aside from that, they did a great job building up the tension in the closing minutes with Taylor on the plate. Just everything you mentioned there, the signals, the pitch at his head, the stolen base, point of the stands, like all these what you'd consider baseball cliches, but what's wonderful about it is that it's still somewhat plausible. And that's, again, why baseball makes for great movies, is that, first of all, an inning can last for fucking ever. The situation can constantly be changing. And there's all this interplay between all the people on the field. I've seen this movie multiple times. That tension was at a peak for me. Really good job building it up. And then the elation for the win at the end, perfectly executed.
Yeah, I just also realized why Lynn decided to take the ring off. They're going to the playoffs. She's always got to be with a winner, right? Yeah, I bet you if the Indians had lost, if they hadn't made the playoffs, she's not leaving the attorney for some broke-ass catcher making $60,000 with 2 bad knees. Hell no. But it's funny how the Indians, here we have them winning in the 7th, where in real life they suffered some pain. Some bad pain in 97, only a few short years after this movie, when they became the first team to blow a Game 7 lead in the World Series to the Marlins.
You don't even have to go that far back in Cleveland history to realize like they're going to blow something. Yeah. I mean, come on. What podcast were we recording where they lost to the Cubs?
I think it was that 3-hour Westworld Telegraph.
That's right. Fans rush the field. Have you ever seen fans rush field in baseball, with the exception of the disco night in Detroit?
Only if it was maybe college basketball, or maybe part of the owner's cost-cutting measures was to limit security. But it seemed pretty dangerous. You had a lot of fans out there on the field among the players. I don't think it would have ended so well.
Well, that concludes. That's the end of the movie. I don't know what to say. It's been a while. I take a week off. We should have invited back the meteorologist. Now's the time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters and give you our collective Shat score. If you've never listened to the podcast, a 0 is a perfect movie. It's a 3-pitch strikeout where all you do is drop a couple fastballs and you get up and there's nothing to do other than that. It's fantastic. A 5 white movie is the equivalent of having Shat smeared all over you, much like a 45-year-old knuckleballer still holding on to his prime. So that's the scale. That's how it's going to work. I'll start with Big D. How many wipes would you give this movie?
I have a lot of sentimental feelings about this movie. It was a time when I really loved baseball. I followed it. As you get older, I found I have less time with the family and work to really pay attention to a 4-hour game and 162-game season. But this reminds me of being young, listening to the radio, watching it. The cast was funny. Yes, it's inappropriate. It's racially insensitive. All the characters are driven by sex. A lot of the women aren't portrayed in a really positive way. But in the light of that time period of '89, I think it's a good comedy. I think it's funny. Today it wouldn't fly. I would watch it again. It flew by at 100 and something minutes. So I'm going to give it 2 wipes. It was a 2-wipe comedy.
All right, Gene, how many wipes would you give Major League?
So last night when I wrote my notes down, I thought 2 wipes. But in hindsight, I kind of thought about it a little bit more. And with some of the criticism that I brought up today about it leans very heavily on sex jokes about women, about jokes about people's cultures, just kind of the easy jokes. You could have just as effectively made a movie about these very different characters who have different weaknesses. That's what I found interesting about the movie is what they were overcoming. Cerrano could have just easily been a guy who couldn't hit a curveball. And had a more creative personality than just like, oh, he's the voodoo guy, whatever. So to me, again, I'm going to dial it down. So still an enjoyable movie, but not anything I really love. I'm going to go with 3 wipes.
You guys are both extremely wrong. This movie is absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favorite all-time sports movies. As I explained before, I can watch this movie at any given time. Doesn't matter when. I think it's an homage to the city of Cleveland. Long-time sufferers up until just a couple of years ago when they finally won with the NBA basketball. And then, anyway, this movie is 1.5 wipes for me. It's still brilliant. It does show its age a little bit, but it's still fantastic. So what is the score, Gene?
That brings us up to a 2.16 repeating.
Where does that put us on the Shat movie lineage timeline?
So right now that was a 2.16?
2.16.
Yeah, so that puts us right around the 10 spot in between Beverly Hills Cop at 2 and Home Alone at 2.2.
Yeah, this feels right. Right. Yeah.
Feels right. Gene, what's that face for? What do you...
Home Alone was a turd, man. I mean, I just feel like this is a much better movie than Home Alone. But yeah, it's right. I'd say it is right under Beverly Hills Cop. So at least that we got half of it right.
Well, what's funny is Home Alone, again, you gave it a 3. Roger gave it a 1. That's why the whole numbers got skewed. So we see a trend here. Roger likes slapstick, goofy,
juvenile movies that appeal to people who grew up in white suburbia.
In the safe green zone.
With Randy Newman soundtracks.
Roger's got a friend in me.
All right. What are next week's movies, Big D?
Next week, it's already closed out. It was Alien movies, and we had E.T., Aliens, another Paxton flick, The Fifth Element, one of Gene's favorites, The Thing from John Carpenter, and it was a close 3-way race there between Alien, Fifth Element, and The Thing, but in the end, Fifth Element surprisingly edged it out, so we'll be doing that movie next week.
Wow. All right. And also a guest has offered to come on, Kevin from Real Spoilers, really wants to be part of The Fifth Element, so I'd like to invite him onto the show to do that.
I'm taking the week off.
So be on the lookout for that.
Be on the lookout for what? Did you just decide on there that we're having a 4th guest?
Yeah, we'll have a 4th guest. Or just a guest on the show.
Are you home next week?
Yeah, I'm home next week.
We'll discuss this.
All right. Anyway.
Because guests don't always work out well.
As we discovered.
All right. Gene, do we have any shout-outs?
We do. Shoutouts, if you want to show your support for Shat the Movies, go to shatthemovies.com and scroll down. You see a little slide out that says get a shout out. You can put your name right in there and we will read your name on the air and thank you for your support. This week's shoutouts are Linda Hawkinson, Shatty McMovie Pants, Corey G, Buck, who is from Ohio and actually lives in Columbus and has family in Cleveland. JD from Switzerland, Joanne from Tucson, Josh, Wendy, Nick Ogioni, and Crystal. Thanks again for your shout-outs, guys. And if you'd like to get a shout-out again, just visit shatthemovies.com.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Also, search for us on Facebook. Just search for Shat the Movies Podcast. Our website, again, is shatthemovies.com. Our email is hosts@shatthemovies.com. If you want to suggest a theme, we recently got an email about Spielberg movies. Isn't that right, Big D?
Yes, I will be adding those.
So you can go on and vote weeks in advance on our website. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and Game of Thrones. You can find all that information on that website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Eber, and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Thank you so much for listening. Good night and good luck.
And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from